morning there were tourists in the hotel, about 100 tourists. They left about 10 o'clock. After they left, nobody, only a few people, they stay, civilians, they stay in the hotels, and then just to be covered. And then now we heard that it's been dropped down.
Did the hotels have any flags of showing any nationality?
Yes, the British flag was on the top of the, on the TV. The British flag was on the TV, on the top of the flag.
By the time I went out, second aeroplane came and then I said, boom!
Now, any more after
I'm
that?
staying over there.
So there's two?
Yes.
Not three, but two?
No, the second one I mean.
Second one, yeah.
The second, I was over there at the Oceania building, and all the building
Now,
was
at what point did this hotel go down? Was it the first or the second strike?
the second time.
2 days after the Geneva Agreement, which was supposed to have consolidated the Cyprus peace fire, and an artillery and machine gun battle is raging on the southern slopes of the Kyrenia Mountains.
Few refugees, possibly 2 trucks, are still coming through my location, over. 2 truckloads of refugees have just come past my location, over.
car nous sommes à quelques mètres seulement sur la
La guerre, à peu près que moi je sais faire la cuisine. Les mecs ont dit dans le c'est pour ça que c'est dangereux.
Do not slip. There is the United Nations patrol in the Libya Palace. Ceasefire! There is a United Nations patrol in the Libya Palace Hotel.
All right, sir. We get back.
There is the United Nations patrol in the Libya Palace.
Only hours after the Security Council vote was announced, UN forces in Cyprus were showing the flag, and British-manned ferret scout cars were patrolling the sensitive frontline areas between the Greeks and the Turks. The patrols, usually involving only 2 vehicles, were concentrated in the Kyrenian hills, where the two sides have exchanged regular artillery and small arms fire over the past few days. There is no clearly defined front line, so it's often a matter of cutting across fields and moving cautiously towards positions that could belong to anybody. Although the patrols are in contact with both sides, the information they receive is often misleading, and they have so far failed to prevent the movement of troops or regular clashes. To make sure they don't get too involved, all UN units, in this case men of the Queen's Royal Lancers, have been ordered to paint their vehicles white. The only time this patrol had to do that was during a brief stop for food. Meanwhile, sporadic shelling continued in the hills behind them. This is one of the most important things that the Turkish, Greek and UN military commanders have to sort out. Their representatives met yesterday for the first time. Facing each other across the table, it was soon clear what positions they intended to take.
We have done our best to prevent the violations of ceasefire agreement, and we are doing our best on this regard.
National Guard has not violated the ceasefire agreement since 22nd of July, 1600 hours.
The United Nations representatives from Canada and Britain, apart from the complicated task of persuading them to agree to a fixed front line, are undoubtedly going to have a problem just getting them to stop shooting at each other.
Any talk of cooperation at the moment must seem absurd when looking at these men. They are Greek Cypriot and Greek prisoners held in a jail on the Turkish mainland. 285 of them picked up in the Turkish advance in the days after the July 20th landing. I was allowed to fly to Adana, a city near the main invasion port of Mersin, opposite Cyprus. Here in the town jail, these men are being held as prisoners of war, while their relatives are scattered by their thousands in refugee camps. Some were Cypriot National Guardsmen, at least one a Greek officer, but others were reservists or just suspected of being part of Greek Cypriot resistance.
Yes, please.
How are you? Where are you
Very
from?
Well, thank you. I'm from Nicosia, Cyprus. I'm married. I have 2 children, one boy and a daughter. I was caught on the 14th of August, and till nowadays we are more happy in here due to treatment, medical treatment, food, and the rest.
You're being treated well here?
Yes, please.
Are you being fed well?
Fed well, medical treatment as well, and everything.
Do you hear anything of what is happening in Cyprus? Do you have any news?
Well, mostly not, but usually they are encouraging us that we are to be sent home as soon as possible.
Yes. That is what you are being told here?
Yes, please.
Where do you come from?
I come from Kyrenia, Cyprus.
Were you there during the original fighting?
Yes, I was there at the original fighting. I was caught on the 22nd of July, and I was brought here at the 31st of July. Since now we are treated very well.
You are treated well?
Yes, very well. We want to thank here the Turks, and we wish that we will be home very soon.
Have you had any news at all from Cyprus, from family, or did you know anything of what is happening there?
I haven't got any news from my family. We have sent a letter there through the Red Cross.
You sent a Red Cross, one of the forms,
yes,
to your family, and you are waiting now for an answer.
Yes.
The men are housed, as were the Turkish criminals they've displaced, in a dormitory. These townsmen and villagers from the beautiful island of Cyprus now sleep like sardines in a tin. Here they'll remain until at some international negotiations the statesmen can bring themselves to make peace. There was no sign or complaint of ill treatment. Was this a mere public relations exercise for the benefit of Panorama? I believe not. I asked for the parade to be dismissed and then talked freely to several dozen of the prisoners. The Greek Cypriot prisoners all said one thing which gave some hope about humanity. Although they were desperately short of news from home, their captors had repeatedly reassured them that they were not to worry. They would be going home soon.
Where are you from? I am coming from Larnaca.
Yes. How long have you been a prisoner?
I am a prisoner of war since the 15th of August.
And you were brought pretty well straight over here, were you?
Yeah, I'm very satisfied by the
You're all right,
treatment.
Yes. Who else speaks English?
Yes.
You. Where do you come from?
I come from Berlin, I'm living in Nicosia.
And were you in the National Guard? Or?
I was called for 6 months in National Guard in 1966.
Yes. Here, the human sadness of the Cyprus conflict was overpowering. These were people who'd lived with Turks and British and mostly wanted no trouble. The first question I was asked was, how did Arsenal do last weekend? Another man was on the BBC's listening survey panel and was worried about the last report he hadn't sent. Where do you come from?
I come from Limassol. And I am in the National Guard.
Yeah.
And I captured in Palagithro.
Ah, yes. And were you held in Cyprus for some days before you came here? You were a prisoner in Cyprus first?
Yeah, in Nicosia.
Yes, in Nicosia.
For 5 days.
Do any of you hear any news? Have you heard any news from Cyprus, any of you?
No, we don't have news.
Are you very worried about what is happening? Of course, there have been horrors in Cyprus, the evidence of which is continually appearing. These are the remains of Turkish Cypriots killed in a village south of Nicosia. This was a mixed village of Greeks and Turks. It's clear that many of the Turkish Cypriot men in it were killed, an act of violence which has certainly been committed in reverse in other places, but which here has left the Turkish women in a state of shock and continued alarm for their safety. Because the mainland Turkish army is now just outside the village, the Greeks have largely evacuated themselves and their families, driving off with their possessions to refugee safety. But the Turks have been unable to move because the Greek National Guard still has its men in the village and won't let them go. It keeps the road closed that would let them escape to join up with the Turkish army. 2 British soldiers of the UN force are trying to mediate.
The life of the Turkish in this village.
You can guarantee the lives of the Turks?
Yes, yes.
How can you guarantee?
The Turkish are in this village from a month. You can ask to the Turkish if you have any...
But if you say you can guarantee them, why are they so unhappy here?
The Turkish? I think they are happy.
I think so?
I'd say the opposite myself.
When they're crying, that's happy.
It's the Turkish Cypriot communities like these, which are still cut off in the island's communal confusion, that are the strongest provocation for further Turkish action. But in Ankara, despite the constant publicity when atrocities are uncovered in Cyprus, the most important public demonstration of grief was at the funeral of a Turkish journalist. He'd been caught by the Cypriot National Guard and allegedly shot while blindfolded. This death appears to have shocked the Turkish capital more than any other. He was given virtually a state funeral.